church. Bloody Roots. Reverend Ian Christie is about to begin. Bloody Roots. Please turn to page 666.
From the pages of Sound of the Beast, your weekly heavy metal history lesson with Ian Christie.
Welcome to Roots, your weekly metal history lesson. Today, honoring one of the most magical and eternal of all metal entities, Denmark's great Merciful Fate. Many tracks today by the classic quintet, plus singer King Diamond's solo material, the pre-Merciful Fate band Bratz, side outings by guitar team Denner Sherman, and covers by Emperor and Metallica. I'm Ian Christie, raised from my grave. I'm insane. This is Merciful Fate, evil. You're listening to Roots on SiriusXM. classic beyond classic, one of the eternal metal anthems, the lead-off track from Merciful Fate's 1983 debut album, Melissa, the extended story of the revenge of a witch burned at the stake and the unrequited love of the narrator, singer King Diamond. This is Roots, your weekly metal history lesson every week, looking at a different country, a different time period, a different style of metal, or, as is the case today, different key metal creators who made all the difference and whose contributions to the metal vocabulary turned the entire evolution of the music on its heels and left all other bands waiting to catch up. Today's show, dedicated to bassist Timmy Grabber Hansen, is a retrospective of one of the most eloquent and well thought out, atmospheric, and eternal sounding metal bands ever to come out of anywhere, let alone the not so well known for metal northern nation of Denmark. But situated up there in the rock and roll obsessed Scandinavia, King Diamond and his bandmates grew up in the 1970s, feasting on bands like Thin Lizzy, Deep Purple, Scorpions, and UFO, all of whom were delving into a kind of unnamed darkness, not to mention, of course, the overwhelming shadow of Black Sabbath. All of these bands, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Denmark, whether they were coming from the continent en route to England or from England en route down to play all across Germany and France. Denmark's right there in the middle, and the concert halls of Copenhagen became a training ground for a heavy metal mastery soon to come in the hands of King Diamond and his bandmates, guitarists Michael Denner and Hank Sherman, bassist Timmy Hansen, and drummer Kim Ruz. They learned their lessons so well, and when they went into the studio to record their debut album, Melissa, they emerged with an instant classic masterpiece. Not that it was immediately embraced. The vocal styles of King Diamond was something otherworldly, outlandish, deeply obsessed with Satanism, and always registering this high-pitched falsetto register that knocked people back on their heels. But all of it fused together in this kind of mysterious, dark, and ultra-heavy package with cover art on the first two albums, Melissa and Don't Break the Oath, by Swedish painter Thomas Holm. The magnetic appeal of this was just irresistible. Merciful Fate's Melissa album helped launch the Roadrunner record label in nearby in Holland, and soon in the United States helped launch the Megaforce Records label. Two titanic entities in the world of metal-centric independent record labels. So very pleased to be bringing you today a full hour of music by Merciful Fate and then frontman King Diamond's solo bands. And so soon our souls will be possessed by this dark side of heavy metal that brings together the Judas Priest Sad Wings of Destiny album, classic Black Sabbath, the mysticism of bands like Uriah Heep, and even the progressive elements of somebody like Jethro Tull, but all of it packaged in a modern, but at the same time, timeless and eternal kind of feeling. This is like a record you would find in the basement of a mossy castle somewhere on some European tour. The songs just have super lasting power. The lyrics have become catchphrases, almost every single line of every Merciful Fate song. Some kind of a catchphrase or inspiration for a younger band name. We're going to hear music in the next few minutes by Merciful Fate from the first two albums, Melissa and Don't Break the Oath. There's an Emperor cover of a classic Merciful Fate track, something by the pre-Merciful Fate band Bratz, which was more of a punk band that King Diamond joined, took in a more metallic direction. When that band broke up, split from their CBS Records contract, the beginnings of Merciful Fate were born, all the way back in 1981. The track we'll hear from the Bratz 1980 record doesn't feature King Diamond, but it does, very interestingly, have the high-pitched falsetto vocals. Listen for that very cool embryonic pre-Merciful Fate music, and then, of course, the great open expanse of tracks like this. This is actually from the debut EP, Nuns Have No Fun. It's a song called Doomed by the Living Dead. I'm Ian Christie. You're listening to Roots, your weekly metal history lesson, as we honor the great Merciful Fate and King Diamond on SiriusXM.
I can control
the pages of your heavy metal history lesson. Bloody Roots. Liquid metal!
Go
North, south, east, and west, everybody comes to the Sabbath. That is from the almighty Don't Break the Oath album, the classic demonic Uncle Sam figure painted by Swedish artist Thomas Holm beckoning you from within the flames on the cover. Though not extreme, no blast beats, no scorching vocals, Merciful Fate a huge influence on the darkness and the spirit of black metal in years to come. As we heard by that Emperor cover, no better proponents of black metal than Emperor. And yeah, taking major cues from this Merciful Fate in spirit. Musical influence and how these genres are defined. It's not always so easy to point to specific musical techniques. Sometimes it's just the essence and the aura of the recordings. Welcome back to Roots. This is our Metal Creator Series honoring Merciful Fate and King Diamond. This show dedicated to the memory of Merciful Fate bassist Timmy Grabber Hansen. What's interesting about that second Merciful Fate album, Don't Break the Oath, is that during the period that they were writing that material, a young American band called Metallica with a Danish drummer, Lars Ulrich, were in Denmark, in Copenhagen, recording their second album, Ride the Lightning, at Sweet Silence with Danish producer Flemming Rasmussen. They naturally connected with Merciful Fate, ended up camping out in Merciful Fate's rehearsal studio, writing new material for the Ride the Lightning album, and becoming fast friends, united, first off, both on the Megaforce record label in the States. Massive amounts of mutual respect and admiration flowing between the two bands. And as a result, some of that Merciful Fate's aura and atmosphere made it onto the Metallica Ride the Lightning album. At the same time, Merciful Fate's second album, Don't Break the Oath, a little tighter and more aggressive, a little thrashier than the more classic heavy metal debut, Melissa. Merciful Fate toured the United States with Motorhead, and during their ascent, ruptures within the band began to form, leading to the split and the sad breakup of the original Merciful Fate lineup in 1985. Singer King Diamond, bassist Timmy Hansen, and guitarist Michael Denner went off and formed King Diamond's solo band with a future Motorhead drummer Mickey D. And this was definitely a case where the profile and the reputation of Merciful Fate brought King Diamond up to a certain level of renown in the metal world. He then took it to the next level, became the center of so much attention, and the band was fundamentally different, although significantly similar to Merciful Fate, just in sound. The whole spirit and intent was more focused on fantasies and storytelling and horror, not about this kind of arcane, ritualistic, occult subject matter, not this eternal kind of stuff that Merciful Fate had been doing. The first outing by the King Diamond solo band, of course, the light-spirited, kind of tongue-in-cheek, No Presents for Christmas 12-inch. The options seemed limitless at that time, with metal exploding in 1985 in all directions, but King Diamond very shrewdly sticking with something that he had already made his own in Merciful Fate, but expanding it by branching out into all kinds of nocturnal storytelling, all kinds of spooky bedtime stories. Later this hour, great example of his evolution with a 2019 song representing 40 years of the development of his unique songwriting and vocal technique. And we'll check in during the rest of this show at regular intervals with some 2003 material from the Puppet Master album and a live rendition of a classic King Diamond solo track. King Diamond quickly settled on the concept of each and every album being each song being chapters in an ongoing horror story. This one comes from the Abigail record, a brilliant synthesis of 80s metal at its best, King Diamond storytelling at its finest, and indescribable Merciful Fate King Diamond eerie aura. Song called The Family Ghost. I'm Ian Christie. You're listening to Roots of Merciful Fate and King Diamond on SiriusXM.
The darkness can go so home, and the color will never You all know that every single night for us up here is goddamn Halloween!
my boy up on the stage. Oh no, I think he looked at me. Is he alive? I get a little scared as he starts to play his drum. On the skin of his hand, I see a little cut.
Yes, and after splitting in 1985, Merciful Fate regrouped in the 1990s, recording a succession of new albums with altered lineups and very often seeing the different original five members collaborating in one way or another. But right there, the guitar team of Michael Denner and Hank Sherman from the Masters of Evil record in the 2000s, the truest, I think, return to the spirit and intentions of the original Merciful Fate albums. That's with hugely accomplished drummer Snowy Shaw, himself a veteran of King Diamond and of later Merciful Fate lineups, and outrageous singer Sean Peck from a band called Cage. Notably, that Masters of Evil record, besides being permeated with the beautiful, fluid, unison metal guitars of Denner and Sherman, also reunited with cover artist Thomas Holm, who cast his ultra evil visual presence over the original two Merciful Fate records. Thanks for listening today and celebrating the ongoing presence and eternal metallic majesty and magic of Merciful Fate and early King Diamond. There's 2019 material by King Diamond in about 5 minutes, plus an extended medley by the Merciful Fate fans in Metallica, who concentrated a barrage, a hit parade of classic Merciful Fate guitar riffs into one lengthy song called Merciful Fate. Thanks for joining me. This has been Roots, it's a metal history lesson dedicated to Denmark's immortal Merciful Fate and King Diamond. Learn more about the origins and place in the metal universe of these two bands and these two entities by reading books like Sound of the Beast, The Complete Headbanging History of Heavy Metal, and Metallion, The Slayer Mag Diaries, along with all the other offerings, Swedish Death Metal, Choosing Death, Murder in the Front Row, all at bazillionpoints.com. Today's playlist also at roots.bazillionpoints.com. Merciful Fate emerging at a key time in metal, 1982, 83. These records, these songs started to come out, and there was such a flood of metal coming out at the time. They stood out then, but they exceptionally stand out now and stand alongside the true great titans, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slayer, however you cut it. The allure and hypnotic sounds of these records have not lost anything in the intervening years. We dedicate this show to the memory of Timmy Grabber Hansen, the one-of-a-kind bass player of the classic Merciful Fate material and early King Diamond albums. His passing breaks the circle and leaves a massive hole in our heavy metal hearts. The spirit lives on here in 2019 material by King Diamond. This is the title track of 2019's Masquerade of Madness. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Ian Christie. Stay tuned for the bonus track, a 10-minute Merciful Fate medley by Metallica. Who will be the last to fall in trance? Know your roots!
There is a girl in misery and eternity. Many fingers on the walls.
pages of Sound of the Beast. Your weekly heavy metal history lesson with Ian Christie. Liquid Metal!
They're walking by the night, the moon is full and blue. Long like coats are selling on the rain, the Lord must get through. Now rocks are living in trees, adorning the core. Seven satanic hell creatures heading for the whore. Bringing the blood of a newborn child, yeah. Got to succeed, if not it's Satan's fault. Way out in Egypt in the valley of caves, where the mummified pharaohs pretend dead in their sleep. Yeah, don't touch, never ever steal, unless you're in for the kill. Or you've been hacked by the curse of the pharaohs. Yes, you've been hacked, and the curse is on you. Ooh, the curse of the pharaohs can be so deadly, just destroying your future, making it all shady. Yeah. Don't touch, never ever steal, unless you're in for the kill. Or you'll be hacked by the curse of the pharaohs. Yes, you'll be hacked, and the curse is on you. This song, yeah. I'm a corpse, I'm a corpse, I'm a corpse without soul. Satan, yeah. He's taking his toll. He took it of me. I
just heard Ian Christie's Bloody Roots, Liquid Metal's hour-long crash course in headbanger history.